Thank you for being here today. My name is Jonathan Sines, and I'm the president and attorney for Texas Values. I stand here today with fine folks, and we stand here today to announce that we are so thankful that such a diverse group of people from the legal, from the academic, from the faith, and from the political arenas within Texas and across the country are defending our marriage laws in the state of Texas. Over 20 groups filed legal briefs yesterday and leading up to yesterday, making it clear that Texas has the right to define marriage as one man and one woman, and the U.S. Supreme Court has been very clear on this fact. In addition to that, many of these leaders are here to express, and have expressed in the briefs to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, that there is value in having marriage between one man and one woman. In addition to that, we are so thankful that the people of Texas have spoken very clearly on this issue. In 2005, this issue of the definition of marriage went through the legislative process the appropriate way when it was being debated. And this issue of defining marriage as one man and one woman was supported by 2/3 of a legislature with bipartisan support. Then after that, this issue went to the ballot, where the will of the Texas people was clearly expressed, with 76% of the people going to the polls supporting marriage as one man and one woman. And when that election happened, every county in Texas, all 254 counties except for one, made it clear that marriage is defined as one man and one woman. That's called the will of the people. Historically, that is how these issues are dealt with, and that's how the issue of marriage should be continued to be dealt with. But what we've seen lately is lone federal court judges that think they know better than the will of the people and really usurping their role on such a foundational and fundamental issue at the state level. We are also thankful that we have an Attorney General in the state of Texas, Greg Abbott, who knows what his role is, and he has not turned his back on the Texas people. Instead, he's defending our marriage laws as you would expect a fine Attorney General to do, when other Attorney Generals in other parts of the country have not done that and have disrespected the will of the people. But let's be clear. Children should not be denied a mother and father. And if we redefine marriage, that's essentially what happens from the beginning. And let's also be clear that if the people of Texas are forced by federal judges to redefine marriage and reduce it to simply a loving relationship that is given government approval through some type of contract, we will see people asking for equal protection for issues such as thruples or quartets, simply because they have this issue or something that they consider a loving relationship, and this will be a detriment to the issue of marriage and also a detriment to our society. I also want to make it very clear that our organization, Texas Values, is engaged in an ongoing effort to continue to remind people what Texans stand for. And it's very clear that Texas stands for our marriage laws, and that has been shown at our Texas Marriage Declaration website, where in just a short amount of time already 15,000 people have signed on showing their support for marriage in Texas to be between one man and one woman, as it always has been. You'll see at the table over there, what we've seen is that not only do Texans stand for this, but people throughout the country are supporting Texas as well. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, Lutherans, we've also seen the Southern Baptist Convention file briefs in support. We've seen Becket Fund for Religious Liberty. We've seen academics from Harvard, from Yale, from Princeton, from the University of Texas, making it clear that there's wide support for the state's rights and for marriage as one man and one woman that cuts across political lines, cuts across faith lines, and cuts across demographic lines. So we're happy that Texas has that tremendous support. And with that, I want to have one of our speakers that's with us today come up. Ann Hettinger is here representing the Center for Preservation of American Ideals. Yeah.
Thank you. We too have filed an amicus brief with a U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and our brief will argue these three things. It's going to argue that the state of Texas does have the authority to determine whom and in what manner marriage is entered into. The LGBT community is not alone in those set of citizens that are subject to limitations. Two men can love, a man can love two women. He can only in Texas be married to one. You can't marry your father. You can't get married under a certain age limit. There are limitations to many sets of people in the state of Texas. Secondly, every right that is or benefit that's derived from marriage is available to all citizens through statute, or it can be done by other means. Third, if in fact that is not currently available to them, the remedy is not to change the definition of a marriage, but to change the statute according to that. And so we urge the Fifth Circuit to uphold the Texas law, which again, as Jonathan said, was approved by 76% of Texas voters. Thank you, Jonathan.
Next, we're going to have Pastor Charles Flowers, representing the Texas Pastor Council and many other entities from the San Antonio area. Pastor Flowers.
Some of the organizations that stand with Texas in defense of traditional marriage are the San Antonio Human Rights Coalition, the Community of Churches for Social Action, the Responsible Government Coalition, the Texas Leadership Coalition, the Justice Foundation, Alliance Defending Freedom, the Liberty Council, the Gathering of Pastors and Leaders, the San Antonio Association of Churches, and two others too numerous to take the time to mention. Along with them and represented by them are hundreds of churches, predominantly black and Hispanic, and multiplied thousands of Texas citizens. We defend with this organization traditional marriage on a couple of grounds. First, on a legal basis, because it is Texas law, and that law, as enjoined by the citizens of Texas, should be upheld. Secondly, on a philosophical basis, because it's based on the notion that those who choose to practice a certain lifestyle cannot change, and yet the preponderance of the evidence refutes that claim. We oppose the notion. We also support this on the basis of association. The HLGC, homosexual, lesbian, gender confused, has sought to piggyback on the civil rights movement. The current HLGC agenda is not a legitimate extension of civil rights. Therefore, we have come to announce a divorce between the civil rights movement and the HLGC agenda, citing irreconcilable differences. The Dred Scott decision, 1857, forbade minority people, mainly black, slave or free, to ever participate as citizens in the United States. No such legal decision has ever been rendered in any case with those involved in HLGC. September 1862, our insightful 16th President, Abraham Lincoln, issued the Emancipation Proclamation stating that as of January 1st, 1863, all slaves were free. HLGC group has never been enslaved and therefore has never needed such a proclamation. On the contrary, they have operated in freedom despite their lifestyle choices. The Black Codes of 1865 and 66 restricted movement of minorities, confining them to low-wage job and slave conditions. This too has never happened to those involved in HLGC agenda. On the contrary, they now seek to use the laws to brutalize and bully and restrict the liberties of anyone who is not in agreement with their lifestyle choice. Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, established separate but equal doctrine which marginalized and minimized minorities, both geographically and economically, for 60 years. Again, at no time has this ever been the case with those involved in HLGC. On the contrary, they have coexisted in peace with all other segments of our society. For decades, Jim Crow prohibited minorities from eating in restaurants and other places of public accommodation based solely on the fact of their immutable identity as minorities. Those involved in HLGC have never received such treatment, nor are they in danger of such. On the contrary, a bar owner in Oregon was bullied with a $400,000 fine because their lifestyle choice was inconsistent with the atmosphere he sought to maintain in his own place of business. During the freedom bus rides and marches, minorities were mercilessly beaten and mauled by the state-sponsored militia. Ravenous dogs were released against them, while water hoses of hatred were used to knock them down off their feet and frustrate their efforts. For the HLGC to attach themselves to this sacred suffering is a travesty and a disgrace. They are not a legitimate extension of the civil rights movement. On the contrary, they seek special rights and are protected and a protected opportunity to punish and persecute anyone not in agreement with their lifestyle choice. Tuskegee Institute 12 reports that 1,277 friends of slaves were lynched. No such friends of HLGC has ever been lynched. 3,500 minorities were lynched in the South. No such thing has ever happened to HLGC participants. To claim that they have any extension on civil rights is a disgrace and a travesty. That suffering is sacred, and I stand here in the midst of a colored room today because of the sufferings of many others. That suffering should be honored. Therefore, our divorce decree is published, and it shall stand in the voices and the minds of many minorities across the face of this nation, and certainly in the state of Texas and its major cities, that this Texas law defining marriage as one man to one woman should forever stand in the state of Texas.
Pastor Flowers. And next I want to welcome Kathy Adams from Texas Eagle Forum. Kathy.
Hello, and so happy that you are here today to hear the truth spoken. And Pastor Flowers has spoken our hearts, and I cannot thank him enough. Texas is the fastest growing state in the nation, and there's a reason for that. And part of that reason is traditional marriage. But today we have traditional marriage versus judicial supremacy, judges who are out of order. The Texas Constitution makes it very clear marriage is in the state of Texas between one man and one woman. The Family Code makes it very clear that marriage in the state of Texas is between a man and a woman. This is good for Texas families. We do not accept the homosexual agenda, and that is what we are talking about here. If those who embrace that homosexual agenda want to move to a state that does embrace homosexual marriage, there is a state of Massachusetts that they could move to. But what we're finding is that they're not moving to Massachusetts. In other words, what is happening is that Massachusetts is declining in numbers. People are moving out of that state. So why in the world would Texas, that is growing, and the fastest growing, want to join Massachusetts that is declining? People are moving away. They are voting with their feet out of Massachusetts. Yet, there are liberals who are trying to influence all of us in places like Hollywood and San Francisco. Well, they want to change Texas. And in doing so, that is why Wendy Davis, the candidate for governor of Texas against our fine Attorney General Greg Abbott, has raised 5 times more money out of state than has Greg Abbott. Still, she's behind in the polls. People in Texas are voting. There's one federal judge, one, who says that Texas is wrong. One man. He says that the Texas governor is wrong. One man, one judge, one judicial supremacist. The Texas Constitution somehow is wrong, according to this one judicial supremacist judge. And somehow, every Texas county except for one, the voters are wrong because one judicial supremacist says so. The U.S. Constitution does not impose same-sex marriage. One federal judge does not have the power to amend the U.S. Constitution. And that is why on Monday, the Texas Eagle Forum and the Eagle Forum Education Legal Defense Fund did file an amicus brief to overturn the decision of one judicial supremacist judge.
Thank you, Kathy. Next, I want to have up Pastor Steve Washburn from Pflugerville First Baptist Church.
Well, I've been inspired by all those who have spoken thus far. I think what I'm mindful of here this morning is that we're not here defending a theory. That which we espouse is promoted by all three major world religions. This goes back, in some cases, 6,000 years. This has been the rule of law under the influence of all three major religions for a long, long time. You compare that with only 2%, according to a 2012 Gallup poll, 2% of our population aligns themselves with the LGBT movement. So there's 6,000 years of ironclad government standing with 2% of the population. But all that aside, I'm here to say that I've been doing what I do for 35 years. I am a mental health professional. I've been dealing with marriages and families for 35 years. And my testimony as I come before you here today is that people, men and women, who are raised in single-parent homes, or if they're raised without a mother or without a father, they grow into adulthood somewhat damaged and needing help when they reach adulthood. I have, for 35 years, seen this and evidenced this myself. I've also seen those families coming back together, great healing being resulted, and God being honored. I think before I step aside, I want to say this, and Charles and I are representing pastors all across Texas and perhaps all across the nation. If it becomes illegal for us to stand in our pulpit and preach pro-family issues, if that biblical language becomes hate speech, if we're facing imprisonment by speaking our religion, which is defended by the First Amendment, we're going to see thousands and thousands of Bible-preaching pastors going to jail. I don't think anyone wants to see that. Thank you.
In conclusion, I just want to say Texas Values is so excited that we had an opportunity to file a brief with the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, making it clear that the legal case is very solid about Texas having the right to define marriages between one man and one woman. The U.S. Supreme Court has been clear on this issue in the Windsor case last year, that this issue is still about the states having a right to define that, and if another state wants to define marriage differently, that's up to that state. But we're confident that with the wealth of information that's being provided to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals through over 20 amicus briefs from legal groups, academic groups, religious groups, professors, all kinds of different experts on social science, on the courts, and on the political and government process, that the Fifth Circuit will come to the right conclusion that in marriage, as a result, will be preserved as one man and one woman, as it is and it always has been. So thank you. With that, we conclude. I'm happy to take any questions.
I want to ask you a question. As far as this case goes, does it give you any setbacks that a lot of other states have tried this and are not successful? I mean, North Carolina tried to pass an amendment and that got overturned by the courts. It looks like a wave of actually different opinions when you look at a lot of other states. So what does that mean for Texas?
What's been very clear is that when the issue of marriage goes to a popular vote, that the people overwhelmingly support marriages between one man and one woman. The only change that we have seen in this issue is by a small amount of federal unelected judges. And the federal government through the Obama administration using federal executive power to force states to accept this redefinition of marriage. And so just because a handful of federal judges have decided they want to redefine marriage does not mean that that's appropriate and that's the direction that we should go. As a matter of fact, I think that as these court cases continue to play out, you're just going to see more and more people recognize the tremendous threat of redefining marriage. And I think it's becoming very clear to people that if marriage is redefined, religious liberty will be obliterated. You will see more attacks on churches than we're already seeing right now, and they have already started. Because that is the goal to a lot of people, is not simply to change the definition of marriage, but to essentially destroy it and to have a type of sexual behavior being recognized and protected in law that will be to the detriment of our society and to churches across our country.
Then what do you say to the argument of the separation of church and state? You keep saying it's a detriment to church. What about those who are not religious? Is there any, how do the judges kind of deal with that aspect of it?
Well, unfortunately, what we see is people that seek to redefine marriage, many of them do not respect the right and the role of private individuals and private churches. They seek to change the law, particularly on the issue of marriage and sexuality, to use that as a weapon to attack people of faith. They themselves do not respect any separation of church and state. They want to use government power to break down churches and to force them to bow at the will of the government.
Does Texas Values support civil unions then, or is it just the same marriage that you want to keep the definition of, or is it in general that these rights should not be given to same-sex couples?
Well, I think Texas Values, just like the majority of Texans across the state and so many other states, have made it very clear that the recognition legally of marriage should continue to be between one man and one woman. There's value to that. And we've seen study after study, and that's shown in the amicus briefs that have been filed supporting the state, that mom and dad together raising children do best in that environment. And that's good for society, and that's good for the economy. That's why the government is involved in this definition of marriage. And I don't see any evidence that that's changed.
And last question for you, then I'll let you go. If this court case doesn't go the way you're hoping for it to go, and say the people of Texas are, what's next? Is there another avenue? Is there anything else that can be done?
Sure. Well, the issue of marriage and the value of it continues to be something that obviously people across the country care about. That's why there's so much discussion and debate about it. That will not change. And so regardless of the actions of one federal judge or the current presidential administration, you will see people across the country that care about marriage continue to do what's necessary to preserve it, not only for their own families and for their own states, but for really the continued thriving and existence of our American society. And so regardless of one decision or the next, groups like Texas Values and others will remain steadfast in the protection of marriage between one man and one woman.